thought this way. USDA has been talking to big-scale farmers about cover cropping and things like this. But no one's organizing, no one's getting together, no one's growing the relationships right here in the city. That's what's new about this. You can realize the potential of this. And this initiative depends on communities and individuals to step up and make this a reality. So in order for community carbon to grow, we're inviting communities like St. Andrews to consider becoming what we call pilot communities. Becoming a pilot community for this movement is an intentional process. Robin has created a great detailed handout on this, and I'd like to boil the handout down to 3 movements, or 3 steps. First, a congregation learns about Community Carbon Initiative. We're doing that today, or we're at least introducing it today. And then discerns whether they want to become a pilot community with about a 1 to 2 year time commitment. If they feel called to join the initiative, then the community identifies a pilot site for carbon drawdown actions. This could be on site, at a nearby home, or any other piece of land. Finally, the community commits to sharing what they are learning with Community Carbon, that being the overall initiative, and others who are interested in joining the initiative, so passing on the fruits of the learning. The exciting thing is that we act together to restore balance to the soil, our communities, and larger ecosystems. And we also discover the stories of the soil, discover the stories of the land, and deepen relationships throughout our communities. We connect carbon actions with our spirituality and the ritual of life of our communities. And we engage in ongoing reflection and evaluation. Saying yes means the community has formed a consensus that they want to partner in this ongoing effort. So as you can see, there's a lot of exciting opportunities here. Because this is an organic process, the process could unfold according to the gifts of your community. Maybe you're a person who enjoys plants, soils, birds, and wildlife, and you would like to support ongoing efforts to better steward land through climate actions. Maybe you're passionate about education, in other words, sharing your learning, and you want to explore ways to engage and do outreach with additional communities. Maybe you have the skills that lend to refining strategy, fundraising, or more broadly, leadership roles. Maybe you are interested and you want time to think deeply about how your gifts lend to this initiative. In other words, you need some time to discern. This could be everybody. Finally, this faith community, St. Andrews, has a unique opportunity to be a leader on the most serious challenge we face as human beings, climate change. So far, we have lacked actionable solutions, and what muted solutions we've come up with so far are only slow and inevitable, well, rather terrible outcome. The Community Carbon Initiative presents an immediate and tangible way to breathe life into what is a tremendous problem that often lacks a sense of hope. I'll leave you with the last question. What kind of climate and what kind of legacy do we want to leave for our children, our grandchildren, and future generations to come?
Can you ask the question again? Can you ask your last question again?
What kind of climate and what kind of legacy do we want to leave for our children, grandchildren, and future generations to come? Okay, so at least, if not more important than my presentation, is what I'm looking forward to is your questions. So I will do the best I can to answer any and all questions. We only have, to be considerate of time, roughly 20 minutes. And If there was even time beyond questions, we could break out into like small group or round tables to just have small group discussion, but I'm guessing there'd be a good number of questions. And if I feel there's someone else in our room that's been part of EcoFaith or been in a leadership role or is informed more than me on a part of the initiative, I'll kind of quarterback it and send it another person's direction. But otherwise, just raise your hand, I guess I'll bring the mic to you.
My question is, you gave an example of using a bare strip of land and adding carbon to it. How would you envision like members of the church contributing to this type of thing when a lot of our landscape is green? We've got stuff growing. So can you give us an idea of how we might get involved in something like this?
That's a great question, and it's Carol, yeah. So I wanted to joke facetiously that we should take out every green plant that exists. No. I'll make mention, I didn't mention backyard habitat certification, and we see a potential branching out of providing a community carbon, a sort of community carbon type backyard certification. We're thinking of it tentatively as climate ready. So if you're a backyard habitat person and you're familiar with that program, you could be an excellent resource and a great support to us, because I've only gone through my first site assessment with backyard habitat certification. And to come back to your question, they don't want even sometimes those problem plans to be taken out right away if you don't have something to put in their place. So we don't want to just change up people's yard or take a bulldozer through them or something crazy like that. Each site is different. Where we move a little, maybe take a step away from science, as it were, is we don't start with clean slates. We need to recognize and honor the site-specific conditions. The homeowners, the community members that are stewarding land, and realizing there's a different fit for each site. Okay, so I can't, unfortunately, give you a definitive for the land that you steward, how that's exactly going to look. It's actually going to be more up to you within the, I'm not saying you're necessarily raising your hand to be a pilot site, but it would depend on your site and your community and how that unfolds. But there are more things than just growing a cover crop in an empty spot. As I mentioned, in fact, Backyard Habitat has some of this promoted as well, which shows a little bit of connection with them. They want you to keep leaves on site. When you keep those leaves on site, there literally are a high carbon material. If you know a little bit about composting, you'll know those are high carbon, low nitrogen. And instead of bagging them and having a truck, as I said, haul them away using fuel, let's keep them right then and there, keep the weeds blocked as well, use them as free mulch, and then let them become carbon in the soil. That right there is a plus for our climate, okay? I'm not saying that in itself just means it's going to be a pilot site, but there's a whole kind of like suite of actions that I see that need development, that I could use support, that this initiative needs support developing. So if you're familiar with Backyard Habitat, they have a whole suite of actions you take, and it's kind of a buffet. You pick and choose which actions, and then we also need to do the work of attaching how much carbon those actions relate to, because we want to be able to combine, say, what Dick's doing at his place with what this community, prospectively, if this community so discerns, is doing at the pilot site for this community. And we want to add those up because we're together in this. We're building those relationships, and it's not just about what one person does as an individual. Actually, the opposite. It's what we do together. Was there someone pointing out?
Hi, I'm Dave. I have a comment and a suggestion. On your global carbon cycle, you don't need to go back there, but where it says land use change, you have a 1.1 there, and it's general in all of them, but in actuality it should be 10 or 15. In the 1990s, the Amazon rainforest switched to be an oxygen sink and a carbon dioxide producer, now producing more than 10 billion tons a year of carbon dioxide. So that should be on there. That's a change, but freeway medians and the sides of freeways could be great spots to do this.
Dave, great, and I got your question coming up. Is it Roger? Yeah, thanks, Dave. That chart done by, I think, University of New Hampshire with the carbon cycle is a little bit dated, And I know Dave's not trying to heap more bad news and saying that, no, not at all. But accuracy is important, the science is important, the reality that things are already changing even since this slide was produced, that perhaps the Amazon is a significant carbon sink and the largest forest in the world has now become I didn't know that, so thanks, has actually been a carbon exporter than a carbon sink. So all the more that these kind of actions are needed, and that's how fast things are changing in the world. The second point was about the kind of ODOT, what I'd see as ODOT land, Oregon Department of Transportation. There's some beautiful lupins if you go, I'm gonna guess at the exit, maybe around exit 20 on 205, if you're ever out that way, look, they're still blooming. There's some beautiful lupins, multicolor all along there. That's just a pollinator kind of idea that someone did. I don't know the background of it, but the idea that we couldn't use some of these public areas for that too, great. What I want to do though is say, what does a pilot community want to commit to with the land that they steward? And I can only speak from my own faith perspective, and that is when I feel pricked, when I feel spurred, like, yes, this is deep to how I see myself in terms of my faith, in terms of my spirituality. It's great to teach, it's great to share learning, it's great to build relationships, but I also want to act. I also want to do something about it. And I'd like to, anyway, so that's why I think, yes, it's important that at least the community finds a place that they want to see these things happen. The soil, touch the soil, see the plants grow, and measure it. Because how much better are they equipped and how much better they are to share that learning with the next community. Or just bring somebody that's interested at that point and say, come on out, we're doing our sampling of our cover crop. You can see what it looks like. There's no better teacher or sharing of information than just our eyes and our hands. Yes, Roger.
Sorry, you need to step in.
Yeah, I have a soft voice, so I need this. The question was, what do we do? What do we change? I don't think that we need to particularly be concerned about the answers right now, but to just have a vision that we want to do something. Like, my particular interest is pollinators. And I know other people's interests are, plants, growing different plants or site-adapted plants, these sorts of things. So, we can accomplish a lot of people's objectives by just putting together a little program. So I don't think it's any mystery what we should do. It's just that we should begin to do something, have our conversations, and grow and learn from there.
Thanks, Roger. No, absolutely, and I think I see a little bit of similarity between your question and Carol's. This is not a prescriptive, this is grassroots, and I don't mean that as a pun. Actually, we're trying to do a little less lawn, if anything. Lawn's okay, but it's grassroots in that there's nothing top down. This is totally from the bottom up, and it's totally site by site. It's totally, it's completely, what does, Roger's interests align with Carol's, aligns with so forth, all of you. I think it is important to probably have a home pilot site, but to say that if after you've established a pilot site, maybe, and I'm just talking out loud, maybe there's ways to add in actions that are being taken on additional sites, so then it could also be shared. Or maybe one sees, well, that pilot site, I like how that looked, but let's write a program, as Roger said, and maybe there's another site. There's nothing limiting in any way. There's nothing prescriptive in any way. The only things that I would say as one of the leaders is like, let's do our darndest to measure as much as we can. Admittingly, so this would be, I'm kind of putting a science hat on, there's your quantitative things you can measure, and there's the qualitative. If I were to compare what this initiative is about to backyard habitat, they're almost entirely qualitative. In fact, I don't know of anything. They may have some numbers in the background that they're trying to quantify things, but I say you can always record, say, 5 species of flowers instead of 3 species of flowers. That's an improvement of biodiversity. We can measure some things, but let's try to do our best to track, measure, record, and because that's what, it's the data and the measurement and the impact that you can actually measure that's important. But yet also let's record the qualitative things too. Pruned a tree instead of taking the entire tree out. That would be some benefit, even if we can't directly measure it. That action as a best management practice we can record that as a qualitative action that was beneficial, for example.
What about homeowners associations?
Get on the board.
Yeah, I think, well, I'd say, you know, yeah, you know, sure, they're a problem, but, you know, at some point, if, you know, 10 of 10 houses are on this project, the homeowners association are going to be, you know, drawing down carbon. I mean, or, you know, maybe that's a roadblock for you personally, or it makes it not a near-term thing. But there's a whole community with all kinds of potentials out here that can be done. And I think I would savor that challenge in a way too, because I bet you there's something, if not multiple things that can be done, even within the restrictions of an HOA. And again, you're in a community with all kinds of opportunities. Okay.
No, I was gonna say that get the homeowners association on. Get the homeowners association on this project.
Yeah, okay.
Get yourself elected.
I think that's an important thing, that if somebody wanted to take that up, you know, I think, yeah, they need to be part of the solution as well. However quick or fast that changes, or not, but you know, it's worth it.
So I'm just thinking about my own property, and the property that would make the most sense to do this would be the backyard, because the homeowners association is less cranky about my backyard. Although they're pretty cranky right now, because never mind. But our backyard is quite shady. We have two lovely maple trees that pretty much cover everything. How much carbon can you put into the soil in a shade kind of thing?
Yeah, shady areas, and that's why we're already, even I'll take the first site we have, which is Dick Harmon's site. There's an area around a cedar tree that it kind of opened my eyes. I'd seen this in agriculture, but I hadn't seen it with what might be ornamental, or in his case more like a native plant, a cedar. It might be a native cedar, I'm not 100% sure, but it's a cedar. It wasn't just that the tree was shading or intercepting rainfall, in other words, making the soil dry, and then taking soil from the roots. It actually puts out, we found, what's called an allelopathic chemical hormone naturally that actually precludes, you've probably heard of like black walnut doing this sort of thing, and which is just amazing. Like that, I'm almost happier that we found that than we got a big stand of cover crop. I mean, there's literally just bare ground, nothing grew in that little area, because the tree has claimed that space, and that there's a whole level of chemicals and hormones and things that happen on the level of plants. That's also, there's an equivalent with insects that's just a whole world most people don't even ever see. So I just found that, like, seeing into a world that you can't visibly see, you know, that's a statement of faith right there, isn't it? And we saw then a physical symbol of that when none of the cover crop grew under a cedar tree. What's the point? The point is that there clearly are places that we don't want to be doing cover crops, but you have a whole lot of leaves, it sounds like, right? And so maybe your site in the end is not a pilot site, but why can't we count some process of utilizing that carbon from all those leaves? And that tree, the longer you keep that tree, is just building biomass in the wood and in the roots. So let's appreciate what's there, and and having some landscape design, the last thing you ever want to do is cut down large trees. The last thing you want to do is just pull out plants that are growing. So again, we'd have to look at the site. There's definitely something that can be done. It just may not be the right one for a pilot site, okay?
I just want to say I'm so incredibly excited about this, because it empowers us to do something in our own space, at our own level of commitment, regardless of what our government does. We can make a difference, and I think that there, obviously from people in the room here, there's a lot of interest already.
Yeah, thanks. You really captured that first part of my presentation, which was just not to get too in the weeds of the details and the technicality, but rather how does it reach you emotionally? Yeah.
I have a question. I don't like dirt. And those of you that have been at my home know that most of the flowers out on my patio are artificial. But we do have some plants because my husband, I know he's probably cringing, sitting up there in front. He's very much a plant person. I don't like, I mean, you talk about leaves out there left to mulch. I mean, to me, that's like poking needles in my eyes. It's messy. So we kind of compromise. But I want to ask, is beauty bark, I think that's what they call it, is that beneficial in any way? I mean, does it do anything? Does it, as it's sitting out there, as you cover up your dirt with this beauty bark, is it doing anything that's nice, or is it just looking nice?
Okay.
If you want to answer the question from the point of view of looking over here to the east, okay, there's a big area that's covered with mulch, which we put, I guess you'd call that beauty bark. And if you look there,
It's pretty mulch.
pretty mulch, okay. We covered that area about 4 years ago with 3.5 or 4 inches of mulch. It was done for a couple of reasons, primarily to keep the weeds down. But if you go down in and dig through that mulch right now, the mulch is only this thick. And the rest of that stuff is converted into soil carbon. So even you might call it mulch, that actually is the perfect place to imagine what he's talking about.
Eric, thanks, Eric. Yeah, and I would just tack on, I appreciate the humor. Sometimes it's important to just point out what's raw and real about plastic plants and pots and so forth. Because no, that's part of it, you know? There's things that are cultural here. There's things that we have rituals about. And the question is, you know, how do we feel moved and what makes sense? And we're all, you know, that's what makes, there's some diversity of thought and thinking in this room. And I do like what Eric said too, because that black, so he said 4 inches became 2 inches of what it still looks like beauty bark or mulch bark. And then there was those other 2 inches, and that's that exciting part, because when it becomes black and very small and finely textured, that answers my final question to everybody. What is our legacy? That is legacy carbon. That's gonna be there maybe 100 years, like that big Doug fir tree will be there for, and my wife Jess saw that as we came through. She said, wow, there's a lot of big trees. We don't have those in Northeast Portland so often, and it's actually a sad thing that we don't have more of them. Those big trees are a legacy, you know, and that's another kind of thing one can do. But yeah, what's our legacy? You know, it could be big Doug fir trees. It could be that 2 inches of deep black, formerly beauty bark underneath our soil at our church. These are the things, these are great ideas. This is rich stuff we're talking about.
I want to speak also to this question of what else is there to do if you're not the kind of person who wants to put your hands into the soil. I hope that Mark's amazing presentation has been stimulating all of our imaginations of the numerous directions that this could go in a ministry context. So there's opportunities for education of adults and children. You don't necessarily have to put your hands in the dirt in order to be a part of that. It's already been referenced about Homeowners Association. There are opportunities for public action that enable us to do some of the things we know are good for the whole Earth community that maybe aren't possible for us. I was talking to a pastor friend in Iowa who'd been in conversation with farmers and talking about how from the small scale